I've been collecting vinyl for many years, traveling to shops and shows across the country. I've spoke with collectors, shop owners, and music industry professionals along the way. As vinyl records are having a comeback, so are the stories behind them. I'm Gary Skolnick on The Record Beat. On this episode of Record Beat, we're with musician Jeff Prine. We're getting the artist's perspective on how records were a mainstay throughout his life and musical career.
Really, where it all began is my dad was an orchestra leader. So, like you, we grew up in Brooklyn, and he would, on the weekends, the orchestra would play. And all during the week, the sheet music was laid out. And the big bands, you could see Al Prine and the orchestra. My father would have books. You know, he'd read the crowd, and it'd be 142, and everybody would go to 142, take it out, and go right. So in the house, those records that he purchased to play all the tunes that were current at the time, he had the sheet music for. So you couldn't help but be in the house, and some of it was, you know, just phenomenal music. So, like anything else where you're in a place where you hear a lot of music, we had my dad, and then my brother Glenn, who taught me how to play guitar. He was the one that was more current, and he exposed me to, because I stayed with him, I went everywhere with him, went to the Fillmore, went to Woodstock, but he encouraged me, he showed me how to play, bought me my first guitar, and from that, and going to the Fillmore, there was this natural love for music, and I would listen to my dad's music, and that was here, and then I had my sister who was a doo-wopper. But he would, so we had all this music swirling around. So it started with my father with all the big band music. In the house, my sister was listening to the doo-wops. My brother Glenn was the one that was really searching for all the new music that we were, you know, the English Invasion.
Which was happening then, yes.
Right?
Let's talk about records.
Okay.
And back to, so, you know, your brother early on, he's buying records. Now you start to buy records. You have that in you, where you're going to find out where they came from. So now at this point, you're playing.
Right.
You're 15, 16.
Yep.
And now all of you are kind of buying albums, but you're kind of getting the albums in the end. Am I right?
Yes, but I'm also buying what I want now.
Right, okay.
Because if you ever get to talk to my brother, who I named my son after, he was the one that started me on guitar. And then he said, you just went for it. And what happened is I started bringing records home to him.
Okay.
And those records were more, you know, the jazz stuff for the guitar player. Because for most musicians, no matter what instrument you play, it becomes a natural progression to move along. And you search for more. And you
Better musicianship?
Better musicianship, more dialogue between the musicianship. And that leads you to the world of jazz. And then, so now I go back to my father. And my father, I would mention, so you know, I heard this song, and there was this great guitar player named Bonnie Kessel. Hold on, I go to his record collection. History Records, go listen to them. And it was like that. So it ran the gamut of all the jazz guitar players at the time that were famous. So naturally, being so into the music and guitar, I started reaching out to find the people that I was listening to, who they listened to. So for instance, like a Mike Bloomfield, he was listening to all of the, you know, the three kings, Albert King, B.B. King, Freddie King, and then the more country Delta blues guys, you know, Lightning Hopkins, the list went on. My brother that was into folk music got us all into Bob Dylan, Tom Paxton, Hoyt Axton, I'm sorry. So, you know, and they would buy the records. The Byrds, the Beatles, everybody wanted to be a Beatle.
Right,
I remember playing with a broomstick with my friends, auditioning for Blessed Sacrament for school, you know. And then it moved into, you know, was Cream, Fleetwood Mac, Bloomfield. And then I was like, I wanted more. So now that I started playing and meeting people, I met a guy in the neighborhood, was, you know, who everybody went to, and he was a jazz player. And I was like, holy cow. So he introduced me to all the jazz guitar players that were still alive at the time. And then, you know, it was at the time that George Benson and those guys were just coming up. So now you bring in that element of the music.
Right.
And so with all these bands that I'm mentioning to you, what did I do like you? Records were.
Right.
I got the price tags on them up there. $2.99, right? $2.99.
Oh, yeah.
Remember?
Right.
This album here, The Blues Breaker, John Mayer with Eric Clapton, for most electric guitar players, that was the beginning of that sound.
Okay.
So after hearing Cream, I went back and heard this, and I was like, oh, that's where it came from. But then I listened to where that came from, and it was B.B. King and Albert King. So I got all those records.
Right.
So my collection is everything and anything, including Barbra Streisand, with the most, in the early days.
Yeah.
And I must have 200 jazz records, because my dad collected records for all the years that he was alive. And when he passed away, he left about 1,000 records.
But you're now going out searching.
Now I'm going out.
And you're looking for musicians that are going to turn you on to new stuff. Is that what you're doing?
Yep.
Okay.
And as you know, in New York, we had all the clubs.
Yeah.
So I remember right behind Rick, there's a cassette. So it was going to be Jimmy Rushing. I don't know if you're Mr. 5 by 5. When you hear him, you'll say, okay. They copied the whole Jimmy Rushing, Count Basie orchestra sound and made that the Room Full of Blues.
Oh, okay.
Every one of those songs, I have a record in here, Jimmy Rushing, Mr. 5 by 5. So when it came to jazz or blues shouters, you had Jimmy Rushing, you had Jimmy Witherspoon, and Joe Williams, right? So I got involved in that whole big band sound where there was nothing like a big driving band. And then when I heard the Allman Brothers, at first I thought that it didn't strike me the way Fleetwood Mac or Mike Bloomfield, because Fleetwood Mac was a unit that was, there was 3 guitar players, but really 2 of them had the interplay. But Peter was kind of like the leader. Where in the Allman Brothers, they not only had the 2 great guitar players, and they had a fairly decent keyboard player, but they had him to sing vocals, but they had this big percussion thing going on. And that sounded like a big band to me. So that kind of drew me, and the fact that they were really into these melodies, I always remember my father saying, doesn't matter how fast you play, how much you know, what people remember walking down the block is they sing a melody. And that's who your audience is. I remember the one night Jimmy Rushing was playing. He was down at the Half Note, which was down on Spring Street in downtown. And at the time, I think I was 17. So I talked my friend who could drive, right? We all did that, right?
Yeah.
I talked him into driving.
Right.
He said, I'm not going to drive it to New York. I'm going over to Williamsburg Bridge. But it was like 9 o'clock at night was the show. Like, come on, man, we'll be parking everywhere. And there was, and we go walking into the place, and, so Bob, the guy turns around, what do you want? I said, he told him, and however I affected him, he said, all right, look, you two, you're going to sit over here. I'm getting you 2 Cokes. That's it. I don't want to hear a word out of you. You're tucked away in the corner. I mean, the guy was great.
That's awesome.
And I brought a little cassette player with me. So I said, do you mind if I record? I go, I don't care what you do, but do not move. So I have the cassette over there.
Oh my God, wow.
That I made a CD of it. And, I talked to Bob Perry about this. I said, Bob, I want to get this to somebody because, I would want it done the right way, that the family of Jimmy Rushing would get the proceeds, and I'd like to get it to one of the record companies that, I belong to a Blue Note and Verve. Growing up in New York, I always listened to WBGO because you can get them they're out of Princeton. And I remember I would have the little FM radio right in my bedroom and I would listen, and just the music was phenomenal. Well, this jockey is still there. And he's on, I actually told Rick about this, he's on from, he comes on at noon till 6. And he does 2 hours of blues, but the rest is jazz. And I hear stuff, and looking for, when I'm looking to do the new record, besides my stuff, I have enough material to do kind of like a blues album, but I'm looking for stuff that has not been played that would have some significance, that it's not the same old.
Right.
I hear this tune, I take a picture of it, I go over there, he goes, no, I never even heard that. He looks for it, he goes, well, go look for it. So I looked for it, I found it online, and there was a few other records I just bought recently that this one in particular was very special to me because my dad played this record. It's 2 records, and there are songs off of each one of these, right?
Okay.
And you know how, like, when we were growing up and you listen to AM radio, and after a while that song just wouldn't leave your head. I remember,
right, sure.
I think the first time I drove to Florida, it was Bill Withers. Dun, 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 my babe, you know that song.
Yeah.
You know how you go to bed and you're like, I can't get it out of my mind, right? Well, this whole record, my father, and it's West Coast jazz. And it had a different feel than the East Coast guys. And I talked to my brother up in New York. He goes, man, I think I know where the record is in a record collection. He said, but Jeff, everything's in storage now. So I went online. And I found it was like $12.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to find. There's another record in there that Otis Spann with Fleetwood Mac, Greater Than the Colossus. Now they re-released it on CD that I looked for forever, but it kind of becomes, and Bob does this, he goes, you ever get one of those records you're looking for, and then you give up, and I'm like, as soon as you give up,
that's when you find it.
you find it, and you find it's like $4, right?
That's the beauty of it. Yeah.
So right now I'm talking more about jazz, but when you go out there, there's stuff, there's just stuff that runs the whole genre. Now, vocalists, because I wanted to sing, as a guitar player, I wanted to sing, I studied with a man in New York City, and Cyndi Lauper was right down the hall, and we were in the neighborhood together. So her band and my band were playing. The difference is her band was a cover band, and my band wasn't. We got it.
This is pre-Blue Angel.
Pre-Blue Angel. Because the guys in Blue Angels were the guys I went to school with. They were a year ahead of me. So we were all in Blessed Sacrament together. Now, Eddie Wenzel, who was in Blue Angel with her, he's a kid that I was in the same grade with, and he was a bass player, and he showed me on that guitar how to play Stormy Monday. And he said, do you know Stormy Monday? I'm like, no, what is Stormy Monday? I didn't know at the time, because I didn't hear the Allman Brothers. And that was in the 7th grade. So I said, I can't even play the guitar. He said, well, come over, I'll give you a few lessons. And he just moved to South Carolina, and he's still playing, but he's writing a book with Cyndi Lauper now. Just to let you know.
Yeah, nice.
So Cyndi and I were both taking voice lessons, right? And the guy that taught me, his name was Steve Lawrence. And Sister Mary Beth also just told me she took lessons with him. And she said, wasn't he great? I said, for me he was. He really got me. But he would invite me to see the different people that he was training. And they were all different genres, you know. And, when you hear a great voice or a great musician, no matter what genre they're playing,
you could tell, yeah.
You're just like,
yeah.
So because of that, I would just grab the music. I would grab the music. So looking at the record collection, it starts way back with the same music you and I just look at it as, because I'm a musician and a guitar player, and I kept searching and seeking out more, it became more diversified. And then you realize that most of the jazz guitar players, what makes them so different from the blues and rock guys is blues and rock guys play a certain way, blues scales, pentatonic scales, minor scales, but the jazz guitar players are really emulating horn players. So then, once someone says that to you, the light goes off. And you say, oh, so now you start listening to the horn players, and you're like, oh yeah, man, how do I get that sound? And the lines are so fluid. And then like guitar players, when you say he really plays sweet, like Roy Buchanan, like Bloomfield. Bloomfield was like a horn player. That's why you don't get a lot of guitar players. You and I talk to your brother about this all the time. So you never hear anybody play like Mike Bloomfield. Everybody else, you hear, oh, that sounds like, how many guys you heard sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan? How many guys sound like the Allman Brothers, right? And so the jazz guitar players, once they get into it, they become horn players.
Stay tuned for more Record Beat after this.
Go behind the scenes and experience the magic that brings entertainment to life with a Backstage at Broward Center tour. From exclusive lounges, and star dressing rooms to the green room. And center stage, one of the most Instagrammable locations only the biggest stars in entertainment get to see. Each ticket supports the Broward Center's Road to Recovery campaign. Book your backstage pass today at browardcenter.org.
You know, I was just showing somebody a video from 2009 when we did the Blues Festival up at Boston's on the Beach. That put me on a tangent of B3 players. Who with the B3 players? Jazz guitar players, a drummer, and usually a tenor sax player. And then you start looking at those people, and it just keeps going. And what happens is the record collection, you start with A, think of all the bands that you and I, A to Z, they're in there, but then it's all that jazz stuff.
Yeah.
Hawaiian music, I loved Hawaiian music, I loved the pedal steel. I mean, look at some of the characters, but when you hear them,
Sneaky Pete.
you know Sneaky Pete.
No, I-
Sneaky Pete. So you remember the Flying Burrito Brothers?
Yes, I do.
And you remember Sweetheart of the Rodeo, the Byrds?
Yes.
Okay, so when Graham Parsons came in, and McGuinn and the bass player Chris Hillman talked about making that particular album, the first thing they did is we got to bring in a pedal steel player. So I'm pretty sure it's Sneaky Pete that's on that. And so when I heard that, I started looking at all the other pedal steel players that were being used, right? So Manassas, all those guys. They were using about 5 different guys. But the guy that stood out was Buddy Emmons. Now, Buddy Emmons can play by himself and make you cry, you know. And there's a friend of mine on Facebook that his name is Ronald Sid, and he posts the most incredible music, and it just goes from jazz to Tahitian music to Hawaiian music, but all these slack key players where they do just incredible music. But he does this whole segment on pedal steel players, and you know, I'm like, now I want to be a pedal steel player. But what happens? He just thought, I got to get the music.
Well, it keeps broadening your horizons.
Right.
And you are open enough to allow that in. I remember, you know, getting into the Stones. This is around 68, 69. So now I'm hearing, well, they're just playing all these old blues guys. And, you know, still to this day, I hear like their first or second album.
12 by 5.
I'm thinking it's all their stuff.
No.
And now I come to find out it wasn't. But so I went and I bought, you know, Muddy Waters, and I bought Howlin' Wolf. I couldn't do it. I couldn't get into it. It was too raw for me at that time.
Right.
And then later on in life, I was in a different place, obviously. I'm, you know, say I'm 40 or so, and I start playing cards. And I'm playing what would normally be termed my music, and it's just too rock and roll. It's too, it gets in the way of what we're doing. We're playing cards. I just want background music.
Right.
So I wound up picking up 1 or 2 like blues compilation albums.
Right.
And all of a sudden I realized this just goes so great with my card game. So I start buying a bunch
Which is
of
where
them.
that music was probably played at the time, right?
But I start buying them, and I'll never forget, you know, by that time I had seen a movie about Muddy Waters and the harp player, Little Milton.
Okay.
Little Walter.
Little Walter, right.
And, you know, one of the guys I like would always say, you know, Little Walter. And, you know, that's all I knew about him.
Right.
And I'm thinking, like, how could you listen to an album of a harp, you know, a harmonica player? Can't be done. That's got to be ridiculous. And I got his album, and I'm like, wow, it's like a guitar.
Yeah.
You know, so I now see what you're saying about this as being a musician, being open, and allowing all these other influences in. Really just keeps expanding your repertoire. I mean, you know, all these different styles and types.
So it's like,
Doesn't hinder you.
yeah, it doesn't. And you said 3 things I wanted to hit on is, you know, a funny story when my dad and I, one weekend we were painting the rooms, the bedrooms upstairs on the 2nd floor, right? So he said, why don't you put on some of your music? So I have an album, I don't have it in here, but I have it, I got to show it to you. It's called the Memphis Swamp Jam. And it opens up with B.B. King's Cousin. And I don't get through maybe 12 bars of My Father Turner. What the are you listening to? But it was very raw, very, very raw. But there was something about it that, like coffee growing up, you had to, or wine, you had to acquire a taste.
Right.
And I always felt that with music, I had this connection that I could listen to anything and find.
Yeah.
Like now, I drive my son back and forth to school every morning up to Pinecrest up in Glaze and on the way back. And I have all this different music in it. And he's like, what are you listening to? And I said, that's Ella Fitzgerald with Louis Armstrong. Oh. And then he'll listen. So now at least he listens to jazz. And then I ask him, what are you listening to? Tell me what you and your... He says, well, I'm not really too crazy about what my friends are listening to. He says, I like a lot of stuff that you play, Dad, but some of the stuff I can't take. When I started working at the Funky Biscuit, I pulled 4 records, 4 albums, and I took 2 tunes from all of them, and that was the set. Mm-hmm. And when I showed it to the band, I was able to write some quick charts, and I didn't want to tell them how the songs went. They had the time signatures and everything. And I had some great players with me, like Matt Calderon.
So let them do.
And it just was, I was like, this is everything we're talking about. It's a great conversation. All those shows that I did with the 3 women, I did Women in the Blues, and it was Juanita Dixon, Rita Wilburn, and Cat Rigg. And now, I'm getting ready to do the next record, and I know what I want to do, but I'm waiting for things to open up. But this time, I told you I was looking for a blues tune, and I found it on that one record. When it comes to music, what that did as far as record buying, one of the guys that really made a big difference in the band was a guy I call Muddy Lou Abbott. Lou Abbott that plays drums, and you see him with Piano Bob a lot, and he plays with different people, but he's professor out of Miami U, just a wonderful drummer, sings great. I said, Lou, I need help writing charts for the ladies. So we asked the ladies, what songs do you want to do? And let them pick their own tunes, and we made the charts, and it was diversified enough. So from that, naturally I'd go back, and that's when I'm like, all right, this is all Aretha's stuff, this is this one's stuff, this is that one's stuff. And then I would search. So more records. Count Basie, Fantail. On here, they're Fantail, Whirly Bird, Kid from Riot Bank, April in Paris, 1 O'Clock Jump, Splank, Little Darling. If there was ever a Count Basie list of tunes, those 7 tunes would be like, hey, what are your favorite 7 Beatle tunes?
Okay.
This album for the big band, swinging, but just killer solos, all the great players. For the blues, B.B. King, Live at the Wrigley. Now there's another one called Back in the Alley, which I couldn't find, but I have it. For every blues guitar player that you hear, there's 2 albums that you can say, B.B. King, it's this album. Every blues lick that anybody talks about B.B. King came from this record. Every rock version of those licks, it's the Eric Clapton with John Mayall. Okay. All those licks, but that new sound electrified. Another blues, Otis Spann. So Otis was with Muddy Waters. You can see how much I played this. So this is Fleetwood Mac. It's a double album. Peter Green, Danny Kerwin, Jeremy Spencer, John McVie, and Mick Fleetwood. They were the #1 blues band in England. And Peter became such a moving force till this day. You ask all the blues guitar players about the British blues guitar players, who had the most unique, who did it all? Peter Green. B.B. King came out and said, there's nobody playing like him, right? So they get here, they got Otis Spann, the piano player, and they want to do another record. But they left Chicago, so they go to New York. They go to New York and they do this album called Greater Than a Colossus. And it's the only one that's not on here is Mick Fleetwood. They took the drummer from this with them. And this record, again, for the real guys in the know, they're like, this is it, right? So I would say, BB and Otis I would take for the blues. For the hardcore blues, I would grab that Memphis Swamp Jam because they were all on it. For the English, rock blues, Fleetwood Mac, you can't beat it.
Mm-hmm.
Procol Harum. I'd grab Procol Harum, all right, let's see. Now again, for beautiful harmonies in the United States, the Byrds, Beach Boys back then, right? For, again, blues, rock guitar players, Bloomfield. Of course, the Wheels of Fire album with Eric when he went that way. And then you move into Dickie and Dwayne and the Allman Brothers. For single guys by themselves, Roy Buchanan. I didn't grab a Danny Gatton record, but it would be Danny Gatton, right? You can't go anywhere without Pops. You listen to Louis and it's everything. My favorite record is it's him and Ella Fitzgerald with the Duke Ellington Band. It's just, all right, let's see. Now, this stuff, my father turned me on to this stuff. In New York, back in the day, Norman Granz did live, it's called, let me see, it's called Jazz at the Philharmonic, JATP, right? See that, live, Lester Young. For a single like jazz guitar playing, I would, Johnny Smith, and I probably Johnny Smith because he was originally a trumpet player. He was, again, gifted, but he played so beautifully, and the sound and the tone, and his phrasing was beautiful. I got a whole bunch of records out there. Tony Bennett, Frank Sinatra, Bobby Caldwell.
I was going to ask you about the guitars.
There's history in all of these.
Yeah. I mean, you take these Gibsons, right? What were they originally sold?
This is the first year they made it, 1952. And this was like $256, and the case was like $20.
Oh, wow.
So you figure 10 years earlier, then maybe $200, right?
Right.
This one here is all original. That one I bought for $1,400 6 months after I bought this for $1,500 in 1972. This one is worth...
So they were going up already?
They were going up already. This one now is worth about $200,000, and that one's worth about $10,000.
This one?
Yeah.
Jeff, very nice meeting you. Great hearing your
My
stories.
brother, thank you for listening.
Oh, no, we love them.
But thank you both. This was a blast.
I had a blast. Thanks for joining us on The Record Beat. Join us next time for more perspectives on the record business.